Okay, everybody, we are going to go over how to make a Flash document for this class. I have a Flash shortcut right here that I'm going to use to open up Flash to show you how to build this little demo. And so we went over this in class. This will just be the basics of how to make symbols, how to set up some basic line tools, and other things like that. So you want to start by making an ActionScript 3.0. And your ActionScript 3.0 will bring up something that you can't really use. This is a 3x4 format. We want to use a 1x2 format. So you're going to go to your Modify, Document, or Control-J. And I suggested something at least 2000 in width by 1000 in height, just to give you a high enough DPI for when you export this. The frame ratio should be set to about 30 or 31, and the rest of this, it really doesn't matter, so click OK. I'm going to hold down the space bar, and that will enable me to move this around. Now the scale of this isn't what I want, so I'm going to use the command the control minus to make it smaller or larger. You can see that snaps it to different sizes. You can also hold down the control and use your middle mouse button to scroll in and out in order to rescale this. I don't use that in my demos in class typically because I find that it doesn't work 100% of the time when I'm doing it quickly, so I'll probably continue to use that. Now this is the stage. This is where all of the artwork will happen. Down here at the bottom, these are our layers, and this is our timeline. When you first open this up, you will only have one frame in your timeline, and that's kind of problematic. Now, there is the numbers along the timeline, and you can see this is 1 second at 30, this is 2 seconds at 60, and at 90, we've got this to 3 seconds. Again, like I said, this is just one pose, one frame, 1/30th of a second. Let's give ourselves a little more time. I'm going to go way up to here to around 160. Right click on it or index button on your stylus pen, click and insert a frame. And so this is just one long piece of artwork. Unfortunately, the new version of Flash, they made this very dark black, so it's almost impossible to see where your key poses are. A little bit annoying, I know. Sorry about that. This button here allows you to adjust the scale of your timeline, and that's pretty useful. This is normal. If you set it to tiny, it will allow you to show far more on here. You can see tiny gives you roughly double the number of frames as normal. And then there's another one that I like to use, which is preview in context. And you'll see in a moment why that's useful. Let's go over here and make a shape. I'm just going to make a rectangle to start with. You'll see here that there's this outline color and that there's this inner paint color. I typically turn off the outline color. Most Flash studios don't utilize that when they're doing simplistic characters, and we're going to use more of the basics of Flash than anything else. So R also brings up a shape. Be cautious though, if you hit R multiple times, you're going to get what's called the rectangle primitive tool. That's not as useful as the rectangle tool, so hand selecting it may also be useful to you. Go ahead and make a shape. And you'll see down here in our itty bitty window, it creates this preview in context. Another way you can modify this window is to go to these pyramids where you can resize by expanding and shrinking your pyramids to see how big they are. The initial pass kind of gives you something closer to the format of your screen, but being able to see more keyframes is also useful. But early on in the process, when you're trying to guess what you're doing, this can be a really useful item to use. Let's hit V to get our selection tool. V is in victory, and that allows us to move our shape around. And I'm going to create a keyframe down here by clicking at frame 6. This allows us to kind of keep this in context. It allows us to keep from breaking things apart. You can easily work in what are 1, 2, 3s in 30 frames per second. 3s run a little smoother in this than they do in 2s. Ideally, we do our animation in 2s and break it down into 15 frames per second or 15 images per second in 30 frames per second. But you can get away with doing this in 2s on 3s, which means you're working on 3s, which means you're working on 6s. So down here you'll see that this says frame 6. I'm going to middle mouse index button on the stylus pen and select a insert keyframe. And now I can take this shape and move it. So you can see the preview in context has allowed us to slide this on over to another location. I'll do that one more time at frame, let's go to frame 12, visible down here, right next to where it says FPS. Insert keyframe. And while it's only a fraction of a second, almost a half a second of animation, you can see this is moved around and there's a corresponding displacement in these keyframes. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and pause this right now, and I will start up again and talk a little bit more about how we control things in Flash.